So, the first type of policy we're going to analyze within the ISLNBP framework with general functions is going to be monetary expansion. So, what do we have? We've got our system in matrix notation and we found the Jacobian, right? Now, the only thing we need to do is, of course, to find comparative static derivatives. Now we are talking about monetary expansion. We want to know what happens if central bank increases money supply. So what do we need to do? First, we need to assume that money supply is changing while at the same time world interest rate and level of government spending doesn't. Okay, look what it does to our system. Well, of course, the first part stays the same. Well, here nothing is going to change. Y, C, A, Y, negative I prime, L, I, K, I, negative C, A, E, 0, C, A, E, D, I, D, I, D, E, and of course, here we have D, G, 0, D, and 0 minus K, I, W, D, I, W. Okay, now let's again start with this. Knowing that those are equal to 0, we can easily replace here with 0 and here with 0. Now again we take advantage of the second assumption, which tells us that money supply is changing, and now we can divide both sides of this equation by dm0. As a result, here we have just 1, and here we are obtaining comparative static derivatives of equilibrium income, interest rate, and exchange rate with respect to money supply. Okay, so look, now the only thing we've got to do is to find the comparative static derivatives, which means again we need to calculate appropriate Jacobians. So we'll start with Jacobian Y. Okay, and look, now I just need to replace the first column of our initial Jacobian with vector of exogenous terms. So we've got 0, 1, 0, negative I prime, Li, Ki, negative CAE, 0, CAE. Okay, and this is going to be a trick I'm going to be using all the time. So remember, we can always take the common part. So we can take CAE over here, and this turns into negative 1 and 1. Yeah. Or you know what? We can even take negative CAE. We have 1 and negative 1 over here. Okay? And look, we clearly see that in this case we should use Laplace expansion, right? And we should expand clearly by this column. So look, afterwards, this is going to give us that here we have 1, but element is in the second row, first column, so we're going to have negative 1. It's CAE times negative I prime 1 Ki negative 1. Right? So after multiplication, we get that this is CAE times we could simplify over here. And by this, we are able to actually calculate the first comparative static derivative. So we get that comparative static of equilibrium level of income with respect to minus supply, which is equal to J Y over J, is equal to, okay, look, what do we see? On the top we got CAE, I prime minus KI, and on the bottom CAE, because we just substitute the Jacobian. And look, Jacobian is got at the beginning CAE, there's at the beginning C over here. So we can just get rid out of this, because they're gonna cancel each other out. And as a result, over here, we've got 1 minus C prime, 1 minus T prime, Li plus Ly, I prime minus K I. Look, what do we know about it? We know that the bottom here is negative. Now, this is negative, this is positive, but it has minus in front, so we've got minus on the top, minus on the bottom. We see that this comparative static is positive, which tells us that monetary expansion increases equilibrium level of GDP. Okay, so now we can move on to equilibrium interest rate. Okay, so we need to calculate Ji and replace the second column, right? So we will have Ji and 1 minus C prime, 1 minus T prime, minus C Y, Ly, C A Y. We've got 0, 1, 0. And again, I'm going to take CAE out. Right? So we're going to have negative 1, 0, 1. Okay, again, we are using Laplace expansion. Definitely a good idea over here. So we get that this is CAE. 1 minus C prime, 1 minus T prime, minus CAY. CAY minus 1, 1. And look, what do we get out of it? We get, out of this, we're going to get the same expression. But look, here we will have CAY times negative 1, which is negative CAY, but it goes upstairs, so it's plus. Those two will be cancelling each other out. We're going to get a CAE times 1 minus C prime times 1 minus T prime. And that's it. Okay, so by this token, we can find another comparative static derivative, this time of interest rate. So this is Ji over J. And again, you see CAE is in front of Ji, just as well as J, so they will cancel each other out. So on the top, I just have 1 minus C prime, 1 minus T prime. And in the bottom, 1 minus C prime, 1 minus T prime. Li plus Ly times I prime minus K I. And look, we know that this is negative, this is positive. So we see that the third comparative static derivative here, the second comparative static derivative is negative. So again, we see that money expansion results in lower interest Okay, so finally, one thing we haven't done. So what does money increase in money supply do to exchange rate? Okay, so now we calculate Jacobian E, and we leave the first two columns the way they are. And we put this over. Again, Laplace expansion, definitely the best choice here is the third column. So we get minus up front, right? Because there's one, second row, third column. So we will have minus, and we get rid out of everything except over here. So we get 1 minus c prime, 1 minus t prime, minus CAY, minus I prime, KI. So this is equal to negative 1 minus c prime, 1 minus t prime, minus CAY times KI. And now this whole minus I prime times CAY. Okay, and this is our last comparative static derivative. And it looks like this. So now we are learning what happens to equilibrium exchange rate when money supply is increased. So we divide JE by J, and we get that this is, this one is going to be long, but okay, CAE. So here we put the Jacobian. And on the top, we put this expression. And we need to, of course, evaluate it in a second. So okay, now, we already knew that the Jacobian is negative. But how about the top? Well, this part is positive. This part is positive, but it gets minus up front, right? So this expression is negative. Here we see that this is negative, this is negative. Multiplied by each other give you something positive, but it gets minus up front. So we have negative value in numerator and negative value in the denominator, which means that this is bigger than 0. And look, what does it tell us? Actually, over here, is that we learn from this that higher money supply should be associated with exchange rate depreciation. Now, think about it for a second. Does it make sense? If central bank prints more money, should the money be worth less or more? Well, if there's more of something, the price of it goes down. And the same is true for the currency. If central bank uses monetary expansion, then exchange rate will depreciate, will go up, which means we pay more units of our own currency for 1 unit of foreign currency. And look, this result actually is extremely important. Because look, from here, we learn that actually monetary policy, assuming flexible exchange rate, because we are constantly assuming that exchange rate is determined by the market, which is very good choice for most countries. We see that actually monetary policy can be more powerful. What do I mean by that? Look, over here, I'm going to draw you IS curve. So we've got IS curve, we've got LM curve, and we've got BP curve. Look, the result I'm going to show you right now is true regardless of the degree of capital mobility. The specifics of it change slightly, but in general, we have that monetary policy in open economy with flexible exchange rate is more powerful than in the closed economy. And why is that? Let me explain this. Look, I also told you that degree of capital mobility matters, but we're going to discuss this in the next video in the context of fiscal policy, because in the case of fiscal policy, actually a lot changes depending on the degree of capital mobility. Here, everything will work more or less the same way. Of course, the bigger the capital mobility, the stronger the impact of monetary policy. Why is that? I will explain in a second. Okay. So, look, let's start by reviewing what happens in the closed economy. Okay, if central bank increases money supply, having the same money demand, this lowers interest rate, right? Lower interest rate is associated with higher investment, and higher investment are associated with higher GDP. Now, this, which you see over here, is the internal effect, right? This is what would happen in the closed economy, even if, so basically this is all what happens in the closed economy, even without the interactions with other countries. So we see this first, right? LM moves over here, and look, of course, this point is associated with higher income and lower interest rate. However, this is only what happens in the closed economy. Let's call this 1, because this is let's just say this is the first thing that happens. But as we discussed, in open economy, situation gets a little bit more nuanced, right? Because look, if interest rate is going down, what happens with our assets? Our assets are becoming less competitive, right? They bring lower return in comparison with the world asset. So what people do? Residents from our country buy foreign currency in order to purchase foreign assets, right? How do we see it? Look, if interest rate is going down, capital account goes into deficit. Does it make sense? Of course. Look, if interest rate in our country is falling in comparison to world interest rate, then smart thing to do is to invest the money in a different country. But when you want to invest money in a different country, you would need to purchase their currency. So this creates additional demand for foreign currency. Additional demand for foreign currency means that there is a pressure on depreciation of our own currency, right? Okay, now, what happens? But this is not the end, right? If money, after we use monetary expansion, our GDP increases. And when our GDP increases, what happens? So our current account, we have higher imports, which means current account goes into deficit. But look, when current account goes into deficit, it means that we need more foreigners' money than they need of ours. This creates a pressure on depreciation. And look, because we have a pressure on depreciation from current account and from capital account, then definitely, as an outcome, we will have depreciation. And look, if our currency depreciates, this improves our current account. Improvement of our current account means higher GDP. Higher GDP also means higher money demand and higher interest rate, which will close the deficit in the capital account. And as you see, deficit in current account will be closing as a result of depreciation. So look, what we see over here is that this is not enough. Look, as a result of those two, our currency depreciates. We see depreciation of the currency as BP curve moving down. And look, when BP curve is moving down as a result of currency depreciation, current account is improving. But current account improvement, we see as the move of IS upwards. Right? And finally, we've got new equilibrium. Look, this new equilibrium has higher GDP than the one we had at the beginning, but also it has higher GDP than we would have in a closed economy. However, with interest rate, it's a little bit different. Interest rate is lower than we had it initially. However, it is slightly bigger than the one we would have in a closed economy. Right? So, we clearly see that monetary expansion is more powerful than in context of open economy than in context of closed economy. Right? It comes from the fact that internal mechanism of monetary expansion goes from higher money supply through lower interest rate to higher investment and higher GDP. However, in the open economy, lower interest rate through capital account and capital outflow creates pressure on our currency depreciation, and higher GDP and higher imports create similar pressure from current account. And when our currency depreciates, current account improves, we are selling more, and as a result, our GDP increases further. Okay, what I want you to definitely remember from that in terms of policy recommendation is that monetary expansion is even more effective in open economy than in the closed economy. Of course, assuming we have flexible exchange rates. And by flexible exchange rates, I mean that the value of our currency is set by the market. Okay, so this is enough about monetary policy. In the next video, we're going to move to fiscal expansion. Take care.